of America. I'm John Favreau.
I'm John Lovett.
I'm Tommy Vitor.
On today's pod, you'll hear the interview that Dan and Lovett did with New York Times' Mark Leibovich. Talk about politics, Paul Ryan, and Leibovich's new book about the NFL called Big Game. Today, we're also going to be talking about the latest allegations against Brett Kavanaugh and the news that Trump is considering firing Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein.
That's not exactly right, John. He's been considering firing Rod Rosenstein from the jump.
From the get-go?
There's just anyway.
From the day Mueller was born.
Lovett, how was Love It or Leave It? I saw there was a special studio episode.
Very special. So basically, I got sick on Thursday. I had to cancel the live show, but thanks to Ira Madison III, Emily Heller, Aaron Ryan, all stars of Love It or Leave It, they came in. We did a live show Friday night in the studio here at Cricket HQ. One of my favorite episodes. I was really sorry to have to cancel, and sorry to the guests that had to cancel on, but it's a really good show, and you should check it out. And you know what? There may be some more in-studio editions in your future.
You should stop eating those 7-Eleven hot dogs.
No, those are the only things that keep me alive.
But that's, yeah.
And I like the 7-Eleven pizza.
Me too.
And I continue to believe I'm the only person who buys 7-Eleven pizza before going to Barry's Boot Camp.
I ate so much of that 7-Eleven pizza when I lived near 17th and R. That 7-Eleven there, late night.
Are you a pepperoni person or a cheese person?
Just whatever was there in the thing. I'd walk in and just grab me one of those.
Those.
Anyway,
Pizzagate. Okay, what else?
the final episode of The Wilderness dropped on Monday, and it features an interview with none other than former President Barack Obama.
Cool.
He talks about what makes for a good speech. He talks about Trump and the Republicans, about how Democrats can reclaim patriotism, where we can find hope. It's the series finale is all about message and story and the narrative heading into 2018. So take a listen to an interview with Barack Obama.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you do that?
You said series finale.
It is the series finale.
I'm just saying, leave yourself opening.
Okay.
Season 2.
Sure. Yeah, season 2.
Still in the wilderness.
yeah, if it's still in the wilderness, I think we're going to be in trouble.
The thing I enjoyed about today's episode was just hearing someone talk about things in a positive way. Just such a nice antidote to the news.
Yeah, I realized on a day like today, you wouldn't be looking for an interview with Barack Obama talking about the country in a positive, hopeful way, but it might be
for
the
a
antidote.
well to
It'll
jump
help.
into.
Yeah,
It might be just the antidote you're looking for. So download it today. All right. We put up a lot of new shit on Vote Save America last week. Everyone should check it out. Make sure you're registered. Make sure your friends are registered. We should also note that Tuesday, September 25th is National Voter Registration Day. Did you guys get gifts yet?
Big day.
Gotta get cards.
Got a democracy.
I never liked the cards in that section.
Our
Maudlin.
Our partner, headcount.org, will be registering voters all over the country. You can join them by visiting votesaveamerica.com/do-something and search for events on September 25th so you can help out. Also, our HBO live dress rehearsal show in Los Angeles. We were able to open another section at the theater and want to invite you to come to the show for free Friday, September 28th at the Alex Theater in Glendale. Lots of exciting stuff going on in Glendale. Doors open at 3 p.m., show at 4 p.m. Last check-in can be no later than 3:35 p.m. What is with all the...
This feels very...
Let's just cut all
very
the things
broad
out
for a targeted
Let's just do
thing for LA
Friday,
people.
September 28th at the Alex Theater. RSVP at votesaveamerica.com/HBO Live, and hopefully we'll see you there. Maybe we'll go to the Outback Steakhouse that's in Glendale right after the show.
John, shut
Don't
up.
tell them.
Wouldn't you like to go?
Yeah, that's why.
If you want to see John Lovett.
It will not help. I don't want people to see what happens when I eat at the Outback Steakhouse. People can't see that.
Okay.
My reputation.
Let's talk about Bart Kavanaugh's nomination to the Supreme Court. Over the weekend, just as an agreement to hear testimony from Dr. Christine Blasey Ford was coming together, a separate set of allegations surfaced in a New Yorker article by Ronan Farrow and Jane Mayer on Sunday, this time from a college classmate of Cavanaugh's who says that he once exposed himself to her at a party while they were students at Yale and caused her to touch his penis without her consent when he thrust it into her face. Democrats have called for a delay in the confirmation process to investigate the new allegations. Republicans have said basically, fuck off. Mitch McConnell today called the whole thing a, quote, shameful smear campaign by the Democrats and vowed to hold an up or down vote on Kavanaugh in the near future no matter what. Let's start with the New Yorker story. Lovett, why do you think that Ronan, Jane Mayer, and the New Yorker thought this story was solid enough to run And what are the most salient, important facts in the story to you?
So, there's been a lot of pushback against. Let me take that again. So what's in this story? First of all, there is a woman on the record,
Deborah Ramirez.
Deborah Ramirez on the record, photo saying this is what Brett Kavanaugh did when I was a student at Yale. Now, the New Yorker is incredibly cautious, and so references the fact that she took several days before she felt certain in declaring it was Brett Kavanaugh because she was careful, and they also reference the fact that she had been drinking and that there were gaps in her memory. Nevertheless, she makes this claim. It is backed up by the fact that this was reported at the time, that people were aware that this had happened, that there was someone who had knew at the time that Brett Kavanaugh had been involved in this incident, that Deborah Ramirez remembered that Brett Kavanaugh's name was shouted in the hallway describing what he had done. It's also reported in the story that people at Yale, when Brett Kavanaugh was nominated, were talking about these incidents and talking about his behavior at Yale. Brett Kavanaugh's freshman year roommate finds the story credible, finds Deborah Ramirez believable, and finds the behavior consistent with the kind of behavior he saw from Brett Kavanaugh, the kind of drinking and fucking around he saw from Brett Kavanaugh. And on top of that, Brett Kavanaugh's lawyers gave a statement to the New Yorker, ostensibly to back up Brett Kavanaugh's claims. However, two of the people in that statement are people that Deborah Ramirez alleges were involved in egging Brett Kavanaugh on. One of them is the wife of somebody who was alleged by Deborah Ramirez to have egged Kavanaugh on. And two of the other people in that statement, after the piece came out, reached out to the New Yorker to say they didn't want their names associated with that statement because they could not back up the claims in their rebuttal that this didn't happen. So there is a lot in here to back up Deborah Ramirez's claim. Now, a lot of Republicans have said, but wait, there's no eyewitnesses. There's no eyewitnesses. There have been so many incredibly important stories over the past year where women come forward and say, this is what happened to me, that is corroborated by prompt outcry at the time, in which, of course, there are no other witnesses, either because people were involved or there was no one else there.
Well, and it's important, like you said, the people are involved. The people in the room at the time of this alleged incident was Brett Kavanaugh and a couple of friends who were all egging him on.
Exactly.
One of them had, it's like a toy penis that they were shoving that in her face, and then apparently Brett Kavanaugh pulled his pants down and he did. But it's like Kavanaugh and his buddies, and they were all egging him on. So of course those people aren't going to testify to the story.
Right.
Tommy, what was your reaction?
The key for me is that Dr. Blasey Ford's position is that she wants a more rigorous investigation. She wants the FBI to step in. She wants Mark Judge, who I'm talking about the first story now. She wants Mark Judge, who was there during the first incident as described in high school, to be subpoenaed. The Republicans won't let that happen. Deborah Ramirez wants more investigation to be done of this incident. Republicans don't want that to happen. Their response when they heard about this incident was to fast forward the process and try to ram him through. And the fact is, I wasn't there. I can't tell you for sure what happened. Memory can be unreliable, but if you're involved in trauma, you're probably more likely to remember what happened. And so let's investigate to the best of our ability, and let's try to get to the facts, because that serves both sides. That serves Kavanaugh. That serves the accusers. But the Republicans don't care about the facts. They want to rush the process.
I mean, again, just to go back to what is in this story. Like you said, New Yorker found that Yale classmates had been talking about the story for weeks and months before Dr. Blasey Ford's allegations surfaced. So one thing that is an absolute lie, an easily provable lie, is all of these Republicans saying this is an 11th hour thing, this was just made up. After one allegation happened, someone came forward for another one. No, that is false. That there were Yale classmates emailing around about this story the minute that Brett Kavanaugh was nominated, because they'd all remember hearing it. And classmate of Ramirez's said another student told him about the incident right after it happened. He's in the story, in the New Yorker story. He said he is, quote, 100% sure that he was told at the time that Kavanaugh was the student who exposed himself to Ramirez, and independently, recalled many of the same exact details that Ramirez had told the New Yorker. So you had her details that she told the New Yorker, and this other classmate who hadn't heard what she said, and he said the exact same details. Two other classmates, Richard O. and Mark Krasberg, said they'd heard the story as well, and they just didn't have specific names attached to the story, but they heard the story exactly like Ramirez recounted it.
Yes. And, you know, the New Yorker is so careful. And look, I am outside of this process, but I am very familiar with the care Ronan takes in reporting these stories and the care that the New Yorker takes in reporting these stories. It was interesting. The White House pushback. Eric Wemple wrote a piece in the Washington Post that made this point, which is all the White House's pushback against the New Yorker came from the New Yorker, because in addition to laying out this credible allegation and all the evidence that backs it up from the time and in the years since, they also included very conservatively, very carefully, a lot of caveats. They did an ethical thing, and they said Deborah Ramirez was not comfortable from the jump to say that this is Brett Kavanaugh. She wanted to be sure. They did the ethical thing of talking about the fact that she had been drinking, talking about the fact that there were gaps in her memory. They did the due diligence and the work and provided the information to respect readers enough to say, this is why we believe this is credible. This is why we believe it is worth it for you to know that this is out there, that Senate Democrats are investigating this, and this woman is making this claim. And I just know on a personal level how incredibly seriously Ronan takes getting this right. And I know also that he is not motivated by partisanship. He is not motivated by politics. He would do this if it were a Democrat. He would do this regardless of party. And that's it.
Look, Brett Kavanaugh and his allies over and over again have said, listen to the people who knew me best then. Listen to what they said. Okay, here's James Roche, Kavanaugh's roommate at the time of the alleged incident, recalled him in the New Yorker piece being, quote, frequently incoherently drunk. Quote, is it believable that she was alone with a wolfy group of guys who thought it was funny to sexually torment a girl like Debbie? Yeah, definitely. Is it believable that Kavanaugh was one of them? Yes. That was his college roommate at the time. So it's amazing today how this story, even more than I think the Blasey Ford story, has sort of spiraled into this whole thing like, oh, this allegation is over the top and they didn't have it. But like, it's very well detailed in here.
Yeah. I mean, Kavanaugh doesn't come off as credible. He just did an interview with Fox News where he stuck to his talking points that all he wanted is a fair hearing and an investigation. But again, with regard to Ms. Blasey Ford, Dr. Blasey Ford, they're not calling the one witness. They're not subpoenaing the one witness who could actually shed some light under this if pressed under oath. If you look at his yearbook page, the notion he claimed that he's never been blacked out drunk. He's never not remembered something from drinking. It's all about like the 100 Keg Club and all these like drinking insinuations. I'm not saying that means the allegations are true. It means that he's painting a picture of himself that is not credible when compared to what people are saying, what he wrote about himself at the time in his yearbook, and what his friends are saying at the time.
It's like we've been saying.
Can't lie about the small things.
Exactly. It's like we've been saying since every time we've talked about Brett Kavanaugh, he has been caught lying about things that are so small. You know, like why not say in the interview, oh yeah, have you ever drank to the point where you were blackout drunk and didn't remember anything? No, never, he says.
You were in a club called the Tit and Clit Club, which Fox News did not say in a follow-up to him.
You're in a book by your childhood friend, Mark Judge, as Bart O'Kavanaugh, your drinking buddy.
Pass it all the time. People who knew you said that you got incoherently drunk all the time. Why lie about that little thing?
And one of the other important pieces of news, there's two big pieces of news that we haven't talked about from the New Yorker story. One is that people who know Mark Judge felt it necessary to come out and say his claims about this not being possible are just not true. Mark Judge talked about the fact that he lost his virginity in a sexual. Mark Judge talked about the fact that he lost his virginity in a sexual encounter with multiple men when he was young. That his denials just that his denials are just not true. So, you know, but. There's this two-step process that has gone on with Brett Kavanaugh. One is by dint of partisanship, whether it is sincere or cynical, to not see the ways in which Brett Kavanaugh is consistently dishonest, to not see it around Pryor, not see it about the judiciary, not see it in the opening remarks he made when he was named by Donald Trump, to not see it and deny it and claim he is a man of incredible integrity. Step 2, then use that integrity that is not based on evidence, that's not based on his actions, to deny these allegations. And it's just not an accurate representation of this person that we have seen repeatedly lie under oath to get out of less serious situations than this.
Yeah. And if this were a serious investigation, they would call Mark Judge to testify. Like you said, the woman who talked about Mark Judge was Elizabeth Razor. She dated Mark Judge, and she said that Mark told her a very different story about his days in college. You know, he told her once ashamedly of an incident that involved him and other boys taking turns having sex with a drunk woman. And of course, as she said this, as the New Yorker story posted, Michael Avenatti also came out with claims and said he's now representing a group of people, including one who he described as a victim, with, quote, credible information about Brett Kavanaugh and Mark Judge, who can corroborate allegations of sexual assault from their high school days. Avenatti said that's going to happen. You know, those people are going to come forward within a couple days, apparently. So we'll see if that's a real thing. But, like, all this stuff keeps coming out.
Yeah.
And the one thing that has been held constant throughout this whole thing is the Republican reaction. And then, in fact, it's actually gotten worse.
It's gotten worse. And now their latest iteration is that this is a Democratic smear, and they want us to feel sympathy for Kavanaugh and for his family. And it leaked out that Kavanaugh, in a prep session at the White House, was deeply hurt by the accusations and refused to answer them in a prep session. And that is understandable. It is human. But I do not feel any sympathy for him because we know how Brett Kavanaugh, the political staffer, would have reacted in this instance if he was working against himself, because when he worked for Ken Starr, he wanted to force Bill Clinton to answer explicit personal sexual questions. And we know he wrote in a memo that it's their job to, quote, make his pattern of revolting behavior clear piece by painful piece. Yeah. If we're applying the Brett Kavanaugh standard to Brett Kavanaugh, then we should figure out all of these allegations.
But they don't. Yeah, but they don't want to. The Republicans are, if anything, they're digging in even further. The other piece of big news in the New Yorker story is this passage, quote, senior Republican staffers also learned of the allegation last week and in conversations with the New Yorker expressed concern about its potential impact on Kavanaugh's nomination. Soon after, Senate Republicans issued renewed calls to accelerate the timing of a committee vote. So their response to hearing about a potential second allegation of sexual assault against Kavanaugh was to confirm him as fast as possible.
Well, you know, we've been asking this rhetorical question for days. What's so important about Monday? What's so important about Monday? Why are they rushing? Why are they rushing? We couldn't figure it out. It was, are they afraid they'll have to withdraw him, and so they need the time to replace him? None of it really made sense, but now we know they're, regardless of their denials, clearly multiple reporters have been chasing this. New York Times was chasing this. We know the Washington Post was chasing this. The New Yorker was clearly chasing this. And the committee, the White House, Cavanaugh's team, they were clearly aware of it and terrified.
Yeah. You can tell, too, Tommy, you mentioned this, they're making it all about Democrats and the Democratic smear campaign, which is their way of getting out of saying these women are liars. Or they don't want to say two things. They don't want to say these women are liars out loud, or they don't want to say it was a sexual assault, but it happened so long ago, so it doesn't really matter. They don't want to say either of those two things. So what they're saying instead is Democrats are making this up, which is also an obvious lie, because these are women who are coming forward. These are people who know these women who are coming forward. These are people who went to school with Brett Kavanaugh coming forward. These aren't Democrats. These aren't like this isn't some like Democratic smear campaign. That's easily provable.
Well, we know just from the New Yorker's reporting that this was something, the second Brett Kavanaugh's name was in the mix for Supreme Court. People were talking about this. That is how those names emerged, both to Senate Democrats and to reporters chasing the story. I mean, this is not... These are graduates of Yale. These are graduates of Yale. These are people that are dispersed within the upper echelons of our law firms and our academia and business and entertainment. I mean, this is a community of people that talk. This is a community of people that are connected, that know journalists, that know people in government. It is not a surprise that this information would bubble up. It is not a surprise, by the way, that it would become known to a group of to different people, to reporters, to people that work in the Senate.
And Kavanaugh's trying to come out and say the best defense they could muster is he produced calendars from his time in high school, as if a high school kid writes down illegal drinking and committed horrific acts at party. And then he's also on Fox. He said that he was a virgin in high school, as if that's somehow relevant. I mean, I know it's hard to prove a negative, but they're flailing around. And if you want to do a real interview, don't go on Fox. I mean, leave your safe space and like take tough questions. But he does not look prepared to do it.
Are you saying you were not persuaded by the defense offered by Ed Whalen?
I would like to talk about that for a minute. Ed Whalen went on Twitter and he posted a libelous tweet storm where he asserted that another individual who looks like Brett Kavanaugh was the one who committed this act, that it was all a piece of mistaken identity, and then he had to backtrack and take it down. And just another reason everyone should hate DC is that there are Orwellian-sounding organizations like the Ethics and Public Policy Center that are filled with some of the most unethical, depraved, partisan fucking humans in the planet. And this guy just attacks a random person, calls him an attempted rapist because he spent the day looking on Zillow to dig up like schematics of an old house. But this organization didn't even fire him, right? They gave him like a leave of absence. But again, like
you can't do ethics and policy without Ed Whalen.
Yeah, right.
You can't be ethical. You can't figure it out.
But this is bigger than Ed Whalen, right? Because he's trying to say he did this all on his own. But he clearly coordinated with Cavanaugh's team at the White House. And we know this because he clicked on Dr. Ford's LinkedIn page after the Washington Post had called the White House for comment, but before they published her name. So there's no way he could have known unless he got it from them. And we also know that Kavanaugh and his aides were spreading the idea in calls with Capitol Hill because Orrin Hatch's moron deputy chief of staff tweeted, hey, everyone keep an eye on Ed Whalen's Twitter page, for God's sake. So, like, these guys are lying about everything, and they are literally coordinating smear campaigns as they accuse Democrats of doing the same thing.
It also shows you just like the clubby elite nature of Washington, D.C., that a lot of conservatives, a lot of never Trump conservatives too, were out there saying, I know Ed Whalen. Ed Whalen is a serious lawyer. He's a good man, a lot of integrity. And then the guy fucking goes nuts. He's got his it was the one-armed man defense on a fucking 25 tweets. He's got floor plans.
Oh, he's a good libel lawyer.
He's naming another person chosen because his face is roughly the same shape as Brett Kavanaugh's
He's got
face.
maps
at age 18.
He's got maps on the thing of how far from the country club. He's got. I mean, it was
So there's
as bad as it
It
gets.
is stunning just how painful it is for a group of people that believe that someone like Brett Kavanaugh can't lie to them, to be told that we don't accept them at their word. The other piece of this is, it is amazing how quick a lot of conservative intellectuals went to, it's a smear, not we need to hear from this woman, we need to hear about the second allegation. This reporting, it's thin. I'm not sure I can believe this, but no, it has to be a smear. It's a smear by the Democrats, as you said.
So why do you think how did it go that quickly from we should hear her, let's invite her to this hearing, which they did do at first
for Ford,
to now the whole thing's a smear, it's a character assassination, let's just get the vote. It really did travel a very far distance very quickly.
I think it's a tried and true technique, right? Just you Donald Trump it, you deny, and lie, and attack your opponent, one. But then there's like a whole group of conservative, often religious conservatives, like evangelical conservatives like Eric Erickson, who just so desperately want another judge on the court that will uphold the things they care about that they will literally do and say anything. Yeah. They are depraved people.
Again, though, my question on that is, okay, the most important goal for the conservative movement here is to fill the seat with a right-wing judge. There's a whole list of other right-wing judges. They could nominate Amy Barrett today and get her confirmed by November. They could nominate Hardiman. They could nominate any of these fucking people. And they don't. I mean, it was interesting.
It's
I saw
smart political play.
Free Beacon editor Matthew Continetti was tweeting today. He said, a defeated Kavanaugh nomination may well become a rallying cry for conservative activists in the midterms, meaning if he's voted down. A pulled nomination in the aftermath of interventions by the New Yorker and Avenatti would cause those same activists to throw up their hands and lose enthusiasm. So this is basically the Trump argument, too. Mm-hmm. There's a reporting that Trump said to them, like, why did you ever offer her a hearing? Why don't you just fight? Deny, deny, deny. So there's this belief that if they show weakness at all by pulling this nomination and replacing him, even with someone else who's a rock-ribbed conservative that would have all the same exact positions as Brett Kavanaugh, then that is somehow showing weakness and that Republican voters won't come to the polls. Which I don't even know if I buy that. But maybe. I don't know their base.
I don't think anybody knows. There is something sort of twisted in this. One of the reasons I think we've seen a lot of conservative commentators, Fox News types, your Hugh Hewitts, immediately go to a smear. It's quite revealing because Neil Gorsuch wasn't smeared, right?
Right.
No, Neil Gorsuch wasn't smeared. He actually sailed through with several Democratic votes.
And we were angrier about that seat because that was the stolen Garland seat.
Still the stolen seat. But for whatever reason, they find it so incredibly plausible that suddenly Dianne Feinstein, who I do not think could put together a successful heist of, I don't know, a child's piggy bank, and I just don't.
Tough hit on DIFA.
I'm sorry, I just don't.
Not a criminal.
But the idea that suddenly Democrats are these masterminds, sophisticated tricksters and hucksters, it speaks to something dark, which is they believe that they could do that to us.
Right.
They believe that that is the kind of tactics that they could use and have used against Democrats in the past. And, I think the fact that the story in the New Yorker references Senate Democrats investigating this, I think the fact that it did come as we approach this second potential hearing, I think that they all convinced themselves very quickly to not just say, but to actually convince themselves that this was a dirty trick.
I mean, I think Trump's entire ethos is deny everything, fight every allegation, always hit back harder. So like from that narrow lens of understanding him, it makes total sense. But also you see this in a lot of tweets from these guys like Matt Schlapp, these like scummy right-wing grifters who just want to play the victim. They want to be the victim of some attack or smear or coordinated campaigns that allows them to continue to rally their base and attack institutions that we care about. They can never admit that, hey, maybe Clarence Thomas wasn't a great pick, guys. Maybe this guy, Judge Kavanaugh, when you could have had anybody else, was not a great pick. Maybe you fucked up and picked someone who is not who you think he is. They will never allow themselves to get there.
The other thing we know for sure, politicians, people in politics, lie about sex scandals all the time.
Yeah.
Bill Clinton lied over and over again about his sex scandal. Donald Trump has lied over and over again in the face of overwhelming evidence that he did it.
Yeah.
That's what happens when you get, or in some cases, you resign. Al Franken resigned. Eric Schneiderman resigned. But Republicans have decided that if they even have a hint of maybe I did something wrong, maybe I did something toward, perhaps the story's right, maybe you even have different, no, if they say any of that, if they show any sign whatsoever that they may believe women who come forward and make these allegations, then that's weakness, and so they must just deny and lie at any cost. So we know that happens. Yeah.
The other, sorry, no, go on.
No, I was just saying, so this whole thing comes down to, because most of these Republicans will fall in line. Most of them, Lindsey Graham, Orrin Hatch, Mitch McConnell's out there
Lindsey
saying,
Graham just deserves a minute of just flagging how disgusting his comments are. He has said nothing could convince him. I'll hear the lady out.
Yeah.
That's what he said. But I'm not going to play a game here and tell you this will wipe out his entire life because if nothing changes, it won't with me. I mean, he doesn't give a shit what happened. He's playing for the base.
He doesn't give a shit. And a lot of them are basically saying the same thing. It comes down to Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, Jeff Flake, Bob Corker, possibly others who haven't spoken up yet, who've been quiet. Have we gotten any hints from them about how they might vote?
The only thing that I thought was interesting was Susan Collins said today that she would like to hear Deborah Ramirez testify under oath, which is interesting.
And we know that the White House is worried in particular about Flake, too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, somebody asked me this. It's like, why would these allegations matter? Republicans have no bottom. And I was like, actually, that's actually not true. Donald Trump has no bottom. Kellyanne Conway has no bottom. Sarah Huckabee Sanders has no bottom. Mitch McConnell has no bottom. But I don't think it's high enough. But Susan Collins, Jeff Flake, these are people who still do have a bottom. These are people who have shown from time to time, not often enough, integrity. I actually think the truth is whatever they're going to say today, whatever they've said over the past week, we don't know what they're going to do. I don't think they know what they're going to do. So it's still a real fight. And it still really matters that people make calls. It still really matters that people keep the pressure up, because I don't think Lisa Murkowski, Susan Collins, Jeff Flake, I don't think they've given any indication. Nothing that these people have said would be violated by a yes vote or a no vote.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's weird, but it all comes down to the testimony on Thursday, which, like, I don't know how much we're going to learn from all of these senators questioning either Ford or Kavanaugh that we don't already know. Like, do we think this is theater mostly on Thursday, and that, like, maybe the emotion of the hearing could carry impact on some people? I don't know.
I mean, the people arguing that Kavanaugh deserves due process should be appalled what's going to happen on Thursday, because no relevant witnesses are being called. This is not due process.
He gets to go second.
He's like, this is garbage. So, but I do think this is politics. And if people see on Roadblock TV coverage someone that is believable, credible, compelling, I think it will change how they feel about a party that is ramming through a nominee that could have done something awful.
And I think the other thing that could change it is if between now and then, and when they schedule a committee vote, which fucking, Mitch McConnell said, or Lindsey Graham, or one of those assholes, we could schedule it as soon as Friday. So, which goes to show you how pro forma they think the hearing is. If more allegations surface or more information surfaces between now and then, I think that could change.
Yeah, none of these people are particularly good at predicting the future, nor are we. And I think one just truth is TV is unpredictable and the most powerful force in politics.
Yeah,
it is. It's why
sure.
Donald Trump is president. We don't fully understand it. We're not in control of it. And two human beings are going to be human. If this hearing happens, and it's not totally clear we will get to that hearing, but if we do, two human beings will be put in an incredibly strange and unique position that neither one has ever been before in their lives, that no one is ever in, and they will be questioned, and it will be surprising in ways we can't predict, and we will see what happens.
And Kavanaugh just made a bunch of statements on Fox News that give you easy ways to prove, again, that he lies often. So we'll see if that happens.
Yeah, lying, man.
He's an idiot.
All right, let's talk about the other massive story today.
So it's so amazing that 50 minutes into this thing, we're getting to Rod Rosenstein potentially resigning.
Last week,
We
it
had
was
the same problem.
I can't believe that Manafort fucking turning isn't the biggest story by Monday. Now I cannot believe that Rod Rosenstein saying, let's kick this guy out using the cabinet is not the biggest story.
So the New York Times may have given Donald Trump the excuse he's been looking for to fire Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, the man with the authority over Special Counsel Robert Mueller's investigation into Donald Trump and his campaign. The Times piece, published Friday, reported that Rosenstein suggested last year that Trump be secretly recorded in the aftermath of James Comey's firing to, quote, expose the chaos consuming the administration, and that he discussed recruiting cabinet members to invoke the 25th Amendment to remove the president from office for being unfit. So, first of all, holy shit.
Now, John, here's the thing. Rod Rosenstein would never do that. However, Randy O. Rosenstein, actually, it sounds just like him. Just sounds exactly like the king that Randy
Someone who
O.
looks just like him, who lives in a
would do.
house, also with an upstairs.
With a Keebler elf who's mean.
So what do we know about where this story came from and who leaked it to the New York Times?
I don't think we know that at all. The main source on the story seems to be former Deputy FBI Director Andy McCabe's memos that he took contemporaneously. There is a big question debated on Twitter, where all things are solved, about whether this was a calculated leak from pro-Trump people who want to give him a reason to get the base's blood boiling and get rid of Rosenstein, or whether this is, maybe it's unfair. Maybe Rod Rosenstein was kidding. He said, "What do you want me to do? Wear a wire?" And he didn't actually float the idea of the 25th Amendment. It's not. There's a lot of ambiguity here, and I think ultimately, it's the New York Times, I think, raised a lot of questions in the reporting of the story that weren't answered.
It seems the debate is the New York Times report said that Rosenstein was serious. Some other reporting,
the responses to the story said, quotes from the spokespeople.
Right, said he was being sarcastic.
Yeah, you have to I think there's two debates. One is who stood to benefit from this story, and then the second is, does it accurately describe what Rod Rosenstein was doing? And I think we don't know the answer to either question.
But let's say the story was accurately reported. Rod did these things. He talked about the 25th Amendment. He talked about wearing a wire. I'd fire his ass in a heartbeat. He deserves to be fired. That's crazy. Like, let's just level set for a minute. Donald Trump's a monster. I want to protect the Mueller investigation, but you can't do that.
Not the wire part.
You wear a wire in your boss?
No. The discussion of the 25th Amendment, I think, is within bounds.
You think if Barack Obama heard his deputy AG, you wouldn't fire him?
Yeah, the firing thing is right.
I'm saying
whether
it's
it's
against the law.
legitimate. No, I'm saying whether it's
Fire his
legitimate
ass.
to talk about invoking the 25th Amendment.
But if it gets back to you, you're gone.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So it's interesting because when I first started seeing this story breaking and seeing the response that, wait a second, he was being sarcastic. Wait a second, Rod Rosenstein apparently has a terrible sense of humor.
Okay.
I was like, yeah,
Read the room.
that does sound like something more sarcastic. That does sound something like more like a joke blown out of proportion. But then you watch the New York Times reporters very strongly push back on it and say, if this was a joke, why was it in these memos? Why is it recorded contemporaneously in a way that suggests this was serious and important and people took note of it?
I mean, it does seem like I was just saying, I mean, a discussion among Trump cabinet members about invoking the 25th would not completely surprise me. A suggestion by the Deputy Attorney General to do something which sounds illegal, unless there was some legal method I'm not aware of, to wear a wire, doesn't sound like something that Rod Rosenstein would seriously do.
You'd have to be pretty stupid to seriously float that. If you're
Right.
the Deputy Attorney General, who
Right.
presumably knows the law, like oversees
Right,
FISA.
yeah, totally.
Also, hey man, listen, the 25th Amendment, it's exciting. It'd be a cool twist.
Yeah.
It'd be fitting.
Two-thirds of Congress not happening.
But you're not in the cabinet. That's not even your vote. You're just butting into somebody else's business. You're not on that committee.
I mean,
I do forget that the actual Attorney General is Jeff Sessions.
yeah, right.
Sort of.
So does Trump.
I mean, it's one of those things.
He doesn't have an attorney general.
That's right.
I think trust the New York Times is a general matter. I think these are great reporters. They did royally screw up some reporting about what the FBI did or didn't do during the campaign in 2016. So I do think it's okay to have some skepticism here.
Oh,
Yeah.
and by the way, they put out a fucking bullshit story today to undercut the New Yorker, which Mitch McConnell was waving around until Dean Baquet had to give a statement to Eric Wemple saying Ronan Farrow's terrific. I got
That's very accessible.
I got
Lance,
some-
right there.
I got some-
Everyone got that.
You know what? You go back, take it bit by bit, Google your way to understanding me airing that personal vendetta.
Wemple.
Point is, the New York Times.
Start with Wemple.
The point is,
Wemple.
the New York Times is always 100% accurate, and when you question them, they take it
They-
very well.
Look,
Very well.
Look, and again, I continue to believe there are no clear links between Russia and Donald Trump, and that story has been borne out, and they've definitely done enough to make amends for that.
Well,
wonderful
regardless,
bit of journalism.
Donald Trump read the story.
Right.
Yes.
So, a lot of people thought Trump would immediately fire Rosenstein over the weekend, and he didn't.
He did not.
Trump senior advisor Sean Hannity
Yes.
actually told Trump not to fire him. Why do we think he didn't fire him and he was getting advice not to fire him? Because like you said, Tommy, I mean, it makes sense that you would want to fire him if you read that and thought it was true.
I don't know. I mean, I think that it would fire up the base, that it might lead Congress to introduce legislation to protect Mueller, that they want to kill this whole investigation after the midterms. I mean, that's my guess.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm surprised.
I think Sean Hannity, just the thing is, he wakes up every day and thinks what's best for America, and he knows that Rod Rosenstein in that job is what's best for the country right now because he wants to make sure that this investigation is concluded fairly and thoroughly.
I mean, apparently John Kelly was trying to convince him, because he's always so successful at these things.
He's a bad chief of staff.
Bad chief of staff.
All
Is he
right,
still
look, you know
there?
what?
I didn't even know he was still
You
there.
know what? Probably.
But he was trying to convince him. I think they've all tried to convince Trump, look, you can do whatever you want after the midterms.
Right, just
fire Mueller,
chill out for a
fire
while.
Sessions, fire Rosenstein,
Fire Don Jr. from a cannon into the sun.
eliminate the entire cabinet, make yourself king, whatever you want to do.
Right.
Just get past November, because I think they might have sufficiently scared him into thinking Democrats win the House, Democrats win the Senate,
Yeah,
you're getting
done.
impeached.
Right.
And so do all of your firing after the election. And so maybe that's what it's about, or maybe he just, will read in some Post or Time story a week from now, Trump did not adequately get as angry as he usually does because he was busy golfing, and then when he had time to look at his TiVo and see all the reports of what Rosenstein did, he became furious and said, I must fire him immediately.
And we also know that Rod Rosenstein seems to have been quite beseeching today, right? There's been stories about him being
Well,
weeping over this.
So we didn't even get to what happened today. Sorry. So on Monday morning, Axios went so far as to report that Rosenstein told White House Chief of Staff John Kelly that he'll be resigning. The White House announced later that that's not true, that Trump will be meeting with Rosenstein on Thursday to discuss the New York Times story. So what was that all about?
We just
Apparently the New York Times later reported, Mike Schmidt reported tonight, Monday night, that Rosenstein was ready to resign, that his office had a statement written up, that he was emotional.
And then you have Vanity Fair reporting that this was an effort to distract from the Brett Kavanaugh allegations because they knew that a story about Rosenstein being fired would be enough to get Kavanaugh off the front pages and closer to confirmation. I think the one thing we know is these are a lot of good reporters talking to liars, trying to check the facts on what those liars have said about other liars in a building full with people who do not care about anything but themselves and perhaps a lobbying job.
I do love the suggestion that the way the White House would distract from a horrific story is to create another ungodly, awful story for themselves. That is their MO.
No, that is a classic. We released a cat to catch the mouse and a dog to catch the cat and bear to catch the dog.
Classic. My favorite anecdote about this is that when Mr. Rosenstein went over to the White House, he was emotional and he wanted to leave on amicable terms, not in a manner that would trigger an angry Twitter tirade from Mr. Trump. He didn't want a tweet storm.
Worried about the tweet storm, huh?
Thanks, Rod.
Man, sticks and stones, bud. The tweets will never hurt me.
Looking out for the country here.
The constitutional crisis would be an inconvenience, but the tweet storm,
deplorable.
That would be deplorable. So what happens?
Imagine just falling down on your hands and knees and begging Donald Trump not to tweet about you.
Don't do it.
Please don't tweet about me, sir.
Not the
no,
280
Mr. President,
characters.
sir, not the characters.
Don't make me set up a GoFundMe.
Oh no! Don't turn the caps lock off.
No exclamation point. No exclamation. Please, Mr. Trump.
Don't give me the nickname.
No, not a
nickname.
nickname.
Don't give me the nickname.
Oh God, Mr. Trump, I beg you. I'm so sorry, Mr. Trump. Oh, you know I love you. I never would have said it. I didn't mean it. Oh, we should have been hanging out more. If we'd hung out more, I'd never put ourselves in this position. Mr. Trump, I'm so sorry.
I hate Jeff too. Call me Roddy.
These New York Times reporters, oh my God, they gave you a bad rap once again.
So
I don't know what this voice is.
I don't either.
Bit Cowardly Lion. It's like Cowardly Lion and Fredo had a baby, which honestly is not a bad.
I heard
Rod
more
Rosenstein.
Towley from South Park, but let's move on.
What happens to the Roche investigation if Rosenstein is fired?
So there seems to be some debate about this. It will likely be overseen by the Solicitor General Noel Francisco. Let me just say it again. There's some debate about this, but it will likely be overseen by the current Solicitor General, who is the next Senate-confirmed Justice Department official in line. But there's a question if he would need to recuse himself because his old law firm is tied up in this thing too, and then it would go to Stephen Engel, the Assistant Attorney for the Office of Legal Counsel. But this all also revolves around whether he fires Rosenstein or Rosenstein resigns, because then Trump could use the Federal Vacancies Act to put someone in his place.
But it's not
and
clear.
he could do that if he was resigned, but not if he fires him.
Right.
But there's confusion if he fires him, if he can use that.
Yes.
But it's also not clear what happens even if he does resign and they put someone into that position, whether it wouldn't still go to Francis.
Yeah, it's very confusing.
I would tell you, the one thing we know for sure is these Justice Department regulations, these things are
tighten them up.
But they are being taken. They're like, let's see how good these things work. Let's fucking red team these things.
Pull apart these things.
Yeah, man.
So then the question is, whoever ends up in that position, what happens to Mueller in the investigation? Natasha Bertrand wrote today, Mueller would still have broad authority, regardless of who would replace Rosenstein, Mueller would still have broad authority to conduct the probe as he sees fit. Federal guidelines mandate that the special counsel, quote, shall not be subject to the day-to-day supervision of any official of the department, but his replacement would still have the power to stymie the probe by deeming certain investigative or prosecutorial steps, quote, inappropriate or unwarranted.
Yeah, so you just rein it in.
So again, these guidelines, who knows?
Because the original mandate for Mueller is incredibly broad. It's like look into collusion and any associated crimes that come out of your investigation, and you could scope that much more.
It does seem like whatever happened, whether Mueller gets fired, whether your investigation is curtailed, that this ends up in court. Probably ends up in front of potential Justice Kavanaugh, which is another twist in this whole thing.
You know, there was an episode of The Daily, a podcast you should not listen to, but make an exception. No, it was a fantastic episode that talked to the person that wrote these guidelines. Now, these guidelines were written
Neil Katyal?
I think that's
That
right.
it was? Yeah, that was a good episode. I'm a Barbara Stan.
But basically, the independent counsel, Kenneth Starr, that investigated Bill Clinton, there was, I think, a bipartisan consensus after that needed to be reined in some way. That was allowed to expire. These regulations replaced it. And one of the things he said was they really did try to think about what would happen if these things were put to the test. And we're in it now.
Let's take them for a spin.
These regulations were written for the worst case scenario. We are now in the worst case scenario, and it is an open question as to whether or not they would hold up. I think the truth is, so far, they have held up. So far, Donald Trump has not been able to defeat Robert Mueller because these rules have insulated him.
I also think this far into the investigation, with this many guilty pleas, this many indictments, it would be surprising if Robert Mueller has not prepared for this eventuality. Already we know that pieces of the investigation could get farmed out to various legal divisions. We've already seen that with the Michael
SDNY.
Cohen stuff at SDNY, New York State.
Yeah.
So the investigation is
He's
now...
a dandelion. You try to blow him over, and that sounded weird. He's a dandelion. He'll go, poof, and then little bits everywhere. Elijah gets it.
This problem has metastasized for Trump. It is out there.
No, the dandelion thing was better. What you said was worse. Guys, dandelions.
And look, this could play into what Rod Rosenstein's thinking too about resigning. Like he might be thinking to himself, Mueller is wrapping this up and has most of it, and maybe I can step out now. Perhaps.
Who knows, man?
I'm just trying a dose of optimism in this.
I'm with you. Rod Rosenstein. Rod Rosenstein has been Hot Rod Rosenstein has been so hard to understand from the very beginning when he wrote that crazy statement that was used to justify the Comey firing, and then he was surprised by it when obviously that is what it was for.
Wasn't his best work.
He is a
was not his best
typical
work.
DC political hack who was humiliated by Trump on day one and spent the last several years clawing back, kissing his ass.
Please don't do it,
and
Mr.
now
Trump.
is sad
Not
about
the
the
tweets.
tweet storm.
Mr. Trump,
Put the Twitter away.
Trump. Oh my God, not the tweets, not again, Mr. Trump. I can't take another tweet. My heart can't take another one of your terrible tweets.
Okay, what will happen to Rod Rosenstein? So Thursday, we got a hearing about the Supreme Court nominee, and we also at the same time have Trump and Rosenstein meeting. It's going to be a big news day.
I will say this. The one thing Donald Trump loves more than humiliating someone is someone coming before him and humiliating themselves. And
so we'll see.
That's my prediction.
All right, let's move on to our Candidate of the Day segment.
Ooh.
Hey, can I just read you guys a quick breaking news?
Sure.
This is from James Roche, Brett Kavanaugh's freshman roommate at Yale. Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, it's the one who thinks he's a drunk.
It is from this experience that I concluded that although Brett was normally reserved, he was a notably heavy drinker, even by the standards of the time, that he became aggressive and belligerent when he was very drunk.
Yeah, it's similar to what he told the New Yorker. It's just, that's the guy. Brett Kavanaugh keeps telling us, talk to the people who know me best. There was your college roommate during the incident.
And one final lesson on this, something that Ted Cruz didn't learn, something that Brett Kavanaugh didn't learn. Keep your enemies close and your freshman year roommates closer.
Great. Good advice. Okay, let's get to our Candidate of the Day segment.
All right.
This candidate is Jackie Rosen from Nevada.
Oh, we know Jackie Rosen.
We do. She's a friend of the pod. She was on our live show in Vegas. We had a great conversation with her. She is currently representing Nevada's 3rd congressional district in the U.S. House of Representatives. And she is running against Republican incumbent Dirty Dean Heller.
Dirty Dean.
Now,
shifty, dirty politician. Dirty Dean Heller.
We've talked a lot about Dirty Dean here. And yet, this race is considered a toss-up by every major prognosticate. Ooh, what a word.
Indicator?
Prognosticator. Not prognosticate.
Yeah,
that's
I don't know
not
why
prognosticate.
Is that a word?
Anyway,
Anyway,
a word.
And yet, this race is still considered a toss-up. However, Nevada is the only state that Hillary Clinton won in 2016 that currently has a Republican senator up for re-election.
Man, what a bad... That's just a reminder of how tough that Senate map is, by the way.
I know.
Continue.
The Senate, so this is one of the few opportunities for Democrats to flip a Republican-held seat. 538 has Rosen's chances at 5-9 and Dean Heller's chances at 4-9. So this is close.
That's
is
a
closer.
toss-up.
This is closer than it should be.
That's a toss-up.
What do we know about Jackie Rosen? What do we know about Dean Heller?
Can I just tell you why I'm kind of leaning Dean Heller?
Oh, yeah.
I like my politicians spineless, wishy-washy. I like when you take both sides of the same issue, like repealing the Affordable Care Act or like things that really matter to my constituents. I want you to have a foot in both camps. so that you can just shift positions.
What a shifty motherfucker that guy.
So that's why I'm
it's
leaning.
like, what if you took Marco Rubio, but you
Mhm.
said, I want a little less
Charisma.
Yeah.
and a little more shiftiness, a little less courage,
Dirty D.
and no aptitude for policy whatsoever.
None.
This is someone who votes with Trump, over 90% of the time, made this big show that he was going to oppose the repeal of the Affordable Care Act, partly because the governor of the state of Nevada, the Republican governor,
A
said
heartfelt press conference, John, he
he
gave.
did not want to get rid of Medicaid, which a lot of people in Nevada count on. And so he made this big show of it. And then when Trump leaned on him, he just flipped. It's maybe the biggest flip-flop of any politician in all of 2017.
Can I just ask you that? Didn't you find it compelling when he called the sexual assault allegations against Brett Kavanaugh a little hiccup?
A hiccup, yeah. He's still going strong
was,
with, that was Dean
Is that
Heller
a
over the
thoughtful,
weekend.
respectful
last
way
weekend.
to talk about a serious issue?
Just told a bunch of donors it's a hiccup. We're going to get right through it.
Dean Heller sucks.
Well,
So I was wondering.
kind of hurt my feelings.
So my question was why, if this is a state that Hillary won by a good margin, that Barack Obama won twice, that is by all accounts turning purple, if not blue, why this race is so close. John Ralston, political reporter in Nevada.
Dean.
The
Of
dean
Nevada.
of the
Dean of
Nevada
Nevada
Press
Press
Corps,
Corps.
knows more about Nevada than any other political reporter. He wrote a piece about this the other day. He said that it's all about turnout. This is a midterm where turnout's much lower, and that's especially true in the state of Nevada. In 2014, the last midterm, it was 46%. Compare that to 2016's turnout, 77%. And then, as a result, the electorate is different. In 2016, the Democrats had 49% of the overall electorate, and the Republicans had 36%. In 2014, the last midterm, Republicans were 42% of the electorate, and Democrats were only 37%. Huge shift.
So
in
it's
those
a low
2 years.
it's a low turnout midterm state.
And low turnout in Nevada heavily favors Republicans. So this is when we tell everyone to go vote, to register your friends to vote, especially in the state of Nevada.
I hate
All
it.
right. I think we've debated this enough.
Well,
Anyone else have any final words before we make a decision?
I'm sorry, did I hit my talking point about Dean Heller that he sucks?
yeah, you did. I did forget that we got to spend some time with Jackie Rosen when we were in Nevada. She was incredibly thoughtful. She was the first person in her family to go to college. She was a computer programmer. She really had some interesting experience and some good ideas. So maybe I'm switching.
Okay, we got one switcher. Love it. We know how you feel.
I'm dirty Dean Hellering this thing.
And as the final vote, I have to say I was incredibly impressed with Jackie Rosen. Go listen to our interview with her to hear more from her. And
so we endorse Jackie Rosen.
Jackie Rosen.
Jackie Rosen gets the nod. Oh,
That was a close one.
The music swells, and
same.
that's it.
Okay. I think we've done enough.
It's hot in here.
When we come back, we will have Lovett and Dan's interview with Mark Leibovich
And I
of
can
the
tell
New York
you,
Times.
I learned a lot about football, and I texted Dan during the interview, and I was like, ask more football questions. I'm fascinated.
Go
What
team.
happened?